Today on Trial Watch, he's called the St. Jude of lost legal causes because Alan Dershowitz defends some of the most unpopular people in the world.
It's not my job as a defense lawyer to get my client a ticket to heaven. He's going to have to argue his own case at the pearly gates.
Plus, this man was elected mayor of a major city, even though he was convicted of assault with a deadly weapon.
The State Board of Elections, I think, and the City Board of Canvassers were hoping he didn't win.
All this and more, today on Trial Watch.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Weller.
And I'm Lisa Specht. Welcome to Trial Watch.
The long-running trial unfolded like a soap opera. Handsome and dashing Klaus von Bülow was accused of trying to kill his socialite wife. The courtroom even featured a famous actress as the notorious other woman. Even when the jury reached a verdict, the drama didn't end. It was just beginning.
When I married Sonny, she was the most beautiful divorcee in the world, and one of the wealthiest.
The movie Reversal of Fortune has been nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Jeremy Irons. Irons plays Klaus von Bülow, who was tried twice for attempting to kill his incredibly wealthy wife, Sonny.
Do something. Be a man. I already have a butler.
Reversal of Fortune is no more glamorous or notorious than what happened in real life.
The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant, before he injected insulin into his wife's body...
The case was one of the most spectacular and longest in American history. Everyday people were allowed a nasty glimpse into the lives of the fabulously wealthy. There was Sonny von Bülow, a rich but unhappy woman, now in an irreversible coma. Her second husband, Danish-born Klaus von Bülow. He said he was a count, but no one ever could really trace any noble connections. His mistress, a soap opera star who was pressuring Klaus to dump Sonny. 2 stepchildren who could trace their royal heritage. They thought Klaus was trying to kill their mother with insulin injections. And Cosima, Klaus's only child with Sonny. She stuck by Klaus during 2 long trials.
What are you doing? Did we ring for you?
The basic issue was whether or not Sonny's coma was caused by self-indulgence or whether her husband tried to kill her with insulin injections. Sonny's loyal maid, Maria Schrollhammer, testified that she found a black bag containing insulin in von Bülow's closet.
She's not sleeping. She's unconscious.
You told him to call the doctor, to call her mother. Did he respond in some way?
He said she's sleeping. They didn't sleep the previous nights. Well, she hardly could breathe anymore, and I thought she would stop any minute now, breathing.
The jurors in the first trial examined the needles from the black bag. They heard about a possible motive, Sonny's $75 million. And they heard from von Bülow's mistress. Then they voted.
The jury finds the defendant, Klaus von Bülow, guilty.
The socialite was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Enter Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor known as the St. Jude of lost legal causes.
The evidence just looked overwhelming. They found the needle and had insulin on it. They found high levels of insulin in her blood. They found a little black bag with various drugs. The maid said she saw insulin. He had a
The flamboyant and often controversial attorney assembled a Mission Impossible team of attorneys and Harvard students to take on the von Bülow appeal.
It was fascinating, it was glamorous, it was exciting. It also raised fundamentally important legal issues about private searches, about the government's right to use evidence secured by private people. It raised fundamental questions of guilt or innocence.
It was just the kind of case Dershowitz is known for. Impossible.
It seemed like an open and shut case. And then it started to fall apart.
Klaus von Bülow was facing 30 years in prison. His case seemed hopeless, except to Alan Dershowitz. When Trial Watch returns, we'll see how Dershowitz began to engineer von Bülow's reversal of fortune. Alan Dershowitz was fighting enormous odds. First, he had to overturn Klaus von Bülow's conviction for trying to kill his wife. Then he had to get von Bülow acquitted in a new trial. But the biggest obstacle of all was von Bülow himself.
He had a motive, a wealthy a mistress who was beautiful and a star of a soap opera, and a very, very wealthy wife who we hadn't had sex with for 10 years.
And Klaus von Bülow had already been sentenced to 30 years in prison for trying to kill his wife.
Every lawyer in the world would have taken this case. This was the most celebrated, notorious, controversial case in America at the time.
But to really understand why the lawyer of last resort would take this case, you have to understand Alan Dershowitz's past. People in the Brooklyn Jewish neighborhood where he grew up used to refer to Dershowitz as Harry and Claire's kid, the one who used to be the troublemaker and now is the lawyer for troublemakers. Dershowitz has always been on the outside looking in. He loves to defend the guy everybody hates. There's even a scene about it in the movie, Reversal of Fortune. Ron Silver plays Dershowitz.
You do have one thing in your favor. Everybody hates you.
Well, that's a start.
It is a start. If you come to me with a case in which everybody hates the defendant and everybody thinks the defendant is guilty and despicable, that's my kind of case. Because I really do believe the job of the lawyer is to take the hardest, the toughest, the most unpopular cases.
As usual, Dershowitz used his students to help with the von Bülow case.
Someone's got to defend Klaus. But why you? Why us?
I am pissed off here. The family hired a private prosecutor. Unacceptable. They conducted a private search. Now, we let them get away with that. Rich people won't go to the cops anymore. You know what they're going to do? They're going to get their own lawyers to collect evidence. And then they are going to choose which evidence they feel like passing on to the DA. And the next victim isn't going to be rich like von Bülow, but it's going to be some poor schnook in Detroit.
Dershowitz said his students came around when they met Klaus von Bülow.
He always enthralled them with his stories of this duke and that duchess and this artist and that joke. You know, what do you give a woman who has everything for Christmas? An injection of insulin. And what do you call fear of insulin? Well, claustrophobia. He would tell stories like that.
During the second trial, Dershowitz hammered away at the notes taken by private investigators hired by Sonny's family. The notes were unavailable at the first trial.
For example, the maid said she saw insulin in Klaus von Bülow's bag. That's what she testified to under oath at the trial. But several days after the coma, when she was talking to the private lawyer, she said she didn't see insulin. Had we had those notes, we could have impeached their testimony.
Again, von Bülow's future depended on 12 jurors.
Guilty or not guilty? Not guilty.
Dershowitz wrote the book Reversal of Fortune about the case. His son made it into a movie.
You know, it's very hard to trust someone you don't understand. You're a very strange man.
You have no idea.
He's a hard man to get to know well enough to conclude whether you really deep down like him. It's the clash of worlds that made the case so interesting for me. And let me tell you about his world. Having been inside the Newport mansions and inside the Newport society, you can have it. Thank God I wasn't born rich.
But I give you my word as a gentleman.
There's a line in the movie that has my character talking to the von Bülow character saying, Klaus, legally this was a great victory. Morally, you're on your own. And there's a point to that. It's not my job as a defense lawyer to get my client a ticket to heaven. He's going to have to argue his own case at the pearly gates. But the legal system is not about moral responsibility. There are other ways of dealing with that. The legal system is about whether you cross that line from immorality to illegality. And in my view, Klaus von Bülow didn't do that.
Harry and Claire's kid is still a troublemaker, but a troublemaker who doesn't forget the old Jewish neighborhood, even when he's on a movie set.
The cameras were starting to roll, and I saw Ron Silver pick up a pork spare rib and start putting it in his mouth, and I said, cut, cut. You can't be eating a pork spare rib and putting it in my mouth on film. My mother will never forgive either of us. So we ended up doing the scene with a piece of broccoli in his mouth.
But Dershowitz is still taking on hopeless cases. He'll be back with us again to talk about his plans to win freedom for Hotel Queen Leona Helmsley and for Jeffrey McDonald, the notorious fatal vision doctor convicted of killing his wife and children.
Next up on Trial Watch, Vincent Cianci has all the convictions necessary to be a big city mayor, including one for assault with a deadly weapon. In 1984, Vincent Cianci was forced to resign as mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, after being convicted of assault with a deadly weapon. You might think a felony conviction would have disqualified him from running for any office, much less the same one. Think again.
When I decided to run for mayor of the city of Providence, it was for a very important reason. It was because the city of Providence was on the wrong track.
Charismatic politician Buddy Cianci ran as an independent in a three-way race and won his fourth term as mayor of Providence. It was tight, but after a recount, he was certified the winner by 317 votes. His opponents challenged his victory in the courts, claiming it was against the law for him to be mayor because he's a convicted felon.
I will be the best mayor this city ever had. Thank you.
The only thing that's relevant is that he is convicted of a felony. He had a 5-year suspended term and 5 years probation. That makes him disqualified to hold any public office, or appointed or elected, until 3 years after the end of his sentence.
Cianci's previous terms were fraught with charges of corruption and kickbacks, but it was a crime of passion that forced him from office. In 1983, Cianci invited his estranged wife's lover to his home. Then, with the help of policemen and other city officials, the man was beaten. The mayor was later convicted of assault with a deadly weapon. The court sentenced him to 5 years probation and forced him to resign.
I feel a bit relieved, and I am trying to go out of office in an extremely dignified way, the way I think I came into office. The people deserve that, and I want to give them nothing less.
2 years later, the state passed a law that convicted felons couldn't hold public office until after their sentence was completed. Cianci became a popular radio talk show host. Then, despite the new law, he ran for mayor again as soon as his sentence was up.
You want to get into this? I'll get into it.
Why did his opponents wait until he won the election to raise the issue?
There are 3 reasons which I believe affected it. No opponent wanted to file an objection for fear of creating sympathy for Cianci. There was concern that they weren't sure because it's a prior felony, not a prior election. There was confusion. And that's the second reason. And the third reason is the State Board of Elections, I think, and the City Board of Canvassers were hoping he didn't win. And if he didn't win, the question wouldn't have come up.
Cianci says the law didn't apply to him since it was passed after his conviction.
Earlier this year, the Rhode Island Supreme Court said the law prohibiting ex-cons from holding office for 3 years was passed after Cianci was convicted, so it doesn't apply to him. The court upheld his election as mayor.
Well, next on Trial Watch, when Ernest Franceschi got a speeding ticket, he made a federal case out of it to the tune of $60 million. Many of us have gotten traffic tickets that we feel we don't deserve, but most of us just go ahead and pay them. Not Ernest Franceschi. First, he beat his speeding tickets. Now he's trying to beat everybody else's, too. He's demanding the city of Huntington Beach, California, pay speeders $60 million.
Huntington Beach, California, a happy, fun-loving kind of place. One would never imagine this little slice of heaven under a dark cloud. Huntington Beach is being sued as a racketeering enterprise by this man, lawyer Ernest Franceschi. It all began when Franceschi got a speeding ticket on the Pacific Coast Highway, and then another, and then another.
I discovered during one of the trials of these radar tickets that they didn't have the required traffic engineering survey, and absolutely no right under California law to even be out there using radar.
California law requires a speed survey must be conducted or radar isn't legal. Franceschi says the survey was never made.
I think they have an attitude that they're above the law, that the police can do whatever they want in this city.
and there's no need to comply with the legislative requirements. They're just going to do it anyway, figuring the public would never know.
Franceschi managed to beat the speeding tickets, but that wasn't the end. He took on the California Transportation Board, Caltrans, in what he saw as a justified fight to protect the rights of other motorists.
I don't understand why they didn't do the survey. It's very simple to follow the law.
It is true that a speed survey was not in effect approximately between 1982 and 1990, but it is Caltrans highway, and it's the state's responsibility to do the speed survey. We had requested Caltrans to do it, but for whatever reasons they have, they didn't.
In fact, Franceschi uncovered a letter from the Huntington Beach Chief of Police to a Caltrans state engineer indicating that the engineering survey had expired in 1981. Franceschi was outraged when he learned the city had known of this illegality for years. He contends that the prior knowledge put the city in direct violation of federal RICO laws, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act.
I was looking for a remedy. RICO prohibits certain types of crimes, such as mail fraud, wire fraud, extortion, drug dealing. So in other words, if the city of Huntington Beach were to commit 2 acts of extortion within 10 years, that's considered a pattern of racketeering activity.
So Franceschi is claiming extortion, citing the illegal use of radar to stop motorists in order to take their money.
Extortion under California law is defined basically as the taking of money or property from another through the threat of force or fear. So the police are out there in full uniform, and they're using force or fear by stopping you, making you sign the ticket under fear that you'll go to jail if you don't sign it.
But no money changes hand, and no property is obtained by the officer or by the city by the mere issuance of the traffic citation. So under no set of facts that I can think of does it constitute extortion really to give someone a traffic ticket.
A federal judge will rule if indeed extortion took place on the Pacific Coast Highway. There's a lot at stake in that decision. Franceschi's suit is asking for damages of $60 million. He claims the city has taken $20 million from motorists over the past 9 years. And the RICO statute allows for triple damages.
I think that the application of the RICO statute to the facts of this case is totally inappropriate. RICO is an organized crime law.
Well, that's really a misconception. Most people think of RICO and associate that with mafiosos, but that's not true. The actual statutory language in RICO and the intent of Congress was to prevent the criminal operation of an enterprise, whether it's public or private.
If Franceschi wins his fight against City Hall, what does he stand to gain? Actually, no money. For him, it's something else.
I think lawyers have an obligation to use their learning and skill for the public good. And I think this is just the essence, in the purest sense, of the practice of law. This is what I was trained to do, and this is what I'm doing.
If the federal court rules in Franceschi's favor, he'll not only beat the city, he'll probably bankrupt it. So he says he's careful not to drive in Huntington Beach anymore. Now, we asked people on the street this question. Have you ever been stopped unfairly for speeding? Here's what they had to say.
Oh, many times. And it's always unfair, isn't it? I wasn't speeding. Yes, certainly.
No. I've been caught speeding, but I was.
Well, you see, I live in Ireland, and I have been stopped for speeding, but I was speeding. So it wasn't unfair.
Oh, yeah. I've been stopped a couple times when I've been driving maybe between 60 and 65 for exceeding 55 mile speed limit.
We were driving back from motocrossing, and they pulled us over, and they said we were doing like 85, and we were doing like 70. And everybody drives 70 on the freeway. I mean, who can drive 55? Nobody drives 55.
Never. Never at all.
Well, you've all been told never, ever leave your purse in a shopping cart because it could get stolen. Well, today's snap judgment involves a woman who didn't follow that advice, right, Lisa?
And it was good advice, too. She should have taken it. A woman named Lois was shopping in a grocery store in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. She had her purse and her purchases in the shopping cart. When a man asked her to help him find a certain brand of peas, she left the cart to show him. But he was a crook, and his accomplice named Charlie snatched her purse, which contained nearly $300. Police caught Charlie and convicted him of larceny. But he appealed the verdict, claiming he didn't steal the purse from a person. He merely salvaged it from an abandoned grocery cart. I'll tell you how the appeals court ruled when Trial Watch returns.
If you leave your purse in a shopping cart and someone takes it, Lisa, are they stealing it from you?
Not in this case, Rob. In fact, the North Carolina appeals court said since Lois had left the cart in another aisle, she technically had abandoned it, along with her groceries and her purse. And the court threw out Charlie's larceny conviction. So if you're in North Carolina, you'd better keep your purse very close to you.
Well, that is it for us. Join us again next time on Trial Watch.